This walking disaster of a high schooler who looked like he got hit by the ugly stick so hard it broke in half suddenly receives a spicy love letter from a mystery girl begging to be his obedient little pet and rock his world. The whole mess started when Keiki got a text from the art club president telling him to come to the club room. He immediately showed up like an obedient dog, but was shocked to find the whole place looking like it had been absolutely demolished by a paper shredder, having the worst day of its life. As he tried to ask what happened to this disaster zone, another member straight up accused Sayuki of treating Keiki like her personal slave to handle all her dirty work, which honestly wasn't that far from the truth. The other club members rolled in and started cleaning up the battlefield of trash scattered across the floor like confetti after the world's worst party. Seeing this chaotic cleanup operation, everyone decided to join forces and make the room sparkle again, because apparently teamwork makes the dream work even in anime land. Once they finished transforming the place from a dumpster fire back to civilization, Keiki told the squad to go wash up while he handled the final boss of cleaning, which they gladly accepted because nobody wants to stick around for overtime cleanup duty. After gathering the mops and yeeting the dirty water into oblivion, Keiki returned to the club room where something caught his perverted little eye, a pink love letter tucked under what looked like plot armor, wrapped up like a present from the gods themselves. Being the disgusting degenerate he was, he moved closer to investigate this mysterious development, probably hoping it wasn't just another prank from his so-called friends. To his absolute shock and disbelief, the letter revealed that his potato-looking face was secretly making some mystery girl's heart go absolutely feral, which filled this pathetic excuse for a human being with more excitement, considering he'd never managed to secure himself a single girlfriend, despite years of trying and failing spectacularly. In his overexcited state, he grabbed the mysterious garment and basically lost his mind on the spot, proving once again why he is still single. The next day, while absolutely destroying his buddy Shuma at cards like the gaming legend he pretended to be, he brought up the mysterious love letter situation, desperately seeking advice on how to track down the baddie responsible for this miracle. Shoma, channeling his inner detective with his galaxy brain energy, pointed out the most obvious thing to this brain-dead fool. Since Keiki found the letter chilling in the art club room, the sender had to be one of the girls from the club, which was honestly an elementary level deduction that even a goldfish could figure out. First up was Sayuki, the club president with enough plot to carry 3 different anime series. Then there was Yuika, the blonde bombshell whose head looked like someone inflated a watermelon and called it a day. There was also Nanju, who seemed friendly enough but was flatter than a pancake. And finally, there was Keiki's younger sister Mizuha, who couldn't be ruled out because she was one crazy girl. Armed with this groundbreaking intelligence that would make Sherlock Holmes weep with pride, Keiki strutted into school the next day with the determination of a protagonist about to solve the mystery of the century and figure out which girl had blessed him with this life-changing letter. First, he ran into Sayuki on the stairs and handed her the club room keys, but her suspicious behavior made him wonder if she might be the chosen one behind this whole operation. Later, while minding his own business in the library, he got ambushed by Yuika, who popped out of absolutely nowhere like a ninja, asking him the most random question about whether he preferred large balloons or the smaller variety, which was honestly not the kind of conversation starter he was expecting. Getting hit with such a wild question from someone with the face of an angel nearly made Keiki lose what little sanity he had left, and he almost screamed loud enough to wake the dead from pure shock. However, before he could completely embarrass himself in front of the entire library, this naughty little troublemaker covered his mouth and accused him of being one of those degenerate boobage enthusiasts since he'd been caught red-handed staring at Sayuki's impressive assets lately, which, honestly, wasn't entirely wrong. After dropping that truth bomb, Yuika got all upset because she felt completely outclassed in the chess department, being flatter than a cutting board. Soon after this awkward encounter, Keiki managed to get himself absolutely wrecked on the basketball court after zoning out like an idiot and catching the ball with his face instead of his hands, proving once again that multitasking wasn't his strong suit. He woke up in the infirmary, with Nanju sitting by his side asking if he'd been thinking about some girl when he got distracted and turned his brain off completely. When Keiki had absolutely no answer because his brain was still rebooting, Nanju stormed out looking super annoyed. After school, when Keiki finally felt strong enough to drag himself home without collapsing again, he found Mizuha doing her domestic goddess thing in the kitchen. Getting increasingly frustrated by this whole mystery situation that was driving him absolutely insane, Keiki asked if she knew who was the last person to bounce from the club room after their epic cleaning session. Mizuha casually dropped the bomb that Sayuki was the final one to leave, which left Keiki quite stunned. He briefly lost himself in a fantasy scenario where he burst into the club room like some kind of action hero and confronted Sayuki directly, asking her straight up if she was the mysterious goddess who had sent him this life-changing love letter that turned his world upside down. However, he quickly snapped back to reality, realizing that only someone with the brain capacity of a mental patient would actually go through with such an absolutely unhinged plan. The next day during lunch, Keiki somehow managed to corner Sayuki and sit down with her, which was honestly a bigger achievement than anything he'd accomplished in his entire academic career. He tried asking her in the most roundabout way possible if she had any romantic feelings brewing for his sorry existence, but before he could even finish his pathetic attempt at subtlety, she bolted faster than someone running from their responsibilities, leaving him sitting there like a complete fool. All day long, he kept trying to have an actual conversation with her, but she kept avoiding him like he had some kind of contagious disease that would ruin her perfect reputation. Noticing the absolutely bizarre tension crackling between Keiki and Sayuki, Nanju finally stepped in and told Keiki to stop being such a complete disaster of a human being. She dropped some serious wisdom on him, explaining that girls were absolutely obsessed with guys who looked soft and harmless on the outside, but had that secret tough guy energy lurking beneath the surface. Getting pumped up by this life-changing advice that felt like a cheat code for romance, Keiki suddenly gained the confidence he'd been missing his entire pathetic existence. After school ended and freedom was called, he spotted Sayuki walking home and absolutely sprinted after her like his entire future depended on catching up to this goddess before she disappeared forever. When he finally caught up to her with his lungs practically exploding from the effort, he tried talking to her again, but she attempted to brush him off like he was some annoying fly buzzing around her perfect aura. But this time, channeling his newfound alpha energy, he cornered her like a protagonist who finally figured out the main quest, leaving her with nowhere to escape his determination. Sayuki, looking exasperated, asked what he actually wanted from her. Keiki told her he knew her deepest, darkest secret, which left her speechless. Sayuki then hit him with a curveball question, asking if he would still find her attractive after knowing all her freaky secrets that would probably scare off any normal human being. Keiki, proving he was either the most understanding guy on the planet or just completely desperate, reassured her that he was totally cool with whatever wild stuff she was hiding. Feeling relieved like someone who just confessed their biggest sin and got forgiven, Sayuki told him to meet her in the club room during lunch the next day because she had something earth-shattering to tell him that would change everything. The next day, this unlucky simp dragged himself to the club room like he was walking into the final boss battle, only to find Sayuki waiting for him. She confessed that she'd always felt like he was literally the only guy in the entire universe who would accept her for the absolute freak she truly was beneath her perfect student facade. She then asked him to close his eyes, which he immediately did because he trusted her completely. Moments later, she told him to open them, and Keiki got hit with the most mind-blowing, reality-shattering sight of his entire disappointing life. Sayuki standing there almost completely unclothed, wearing a collar that looked like it came straight out of the most hardcore romance manga ever written, with her laser blasters fully engaged and ready for action like she was about to start the most intense anime battle scene ever. She then absolutely destroyed his remaining brain cells by begging him to make her his personal pet, which nearly caused this poor MC to have a heart attack. Sayuki went on to explain that when Keiki had cornered her during their sidewalk encounter, it proved he had this aggressive alpha side hiding beneath his harmless exterior, which got her super excited. She confessed that she desperately wanted to be his obedient little pet and get disciplined by him all night long like some kind of wild fantasy came to life. She then handed him the leash attached to her collar, bowed her head like she was worshipping some kind of deity, and begged him to become her master with desperation. Later that day, after school ended and reality started setting in, Keiki shared this absolutely insane predicament with his only friend Shuma. He admitted that even though Sayuki had made her thirsty intentions crystal clear like a neon sign flashing in the dark, he still had serious doubts that she was actually the mysterious goddess who left him that life-changing love letter that started this whole crazy adventure. He was absolutely convinced that someone else from the art club was the real mastermind behind this elaborate scheme. Hearing about this detective-level mystery that was driving his friend completely insane, Shuma advised him to keep investigating. Before the school day officially ended and everyone could escape to freedom, Keiki managed to bump into Nanju in class and thanked her for helping him reconcile with Sayuki, which was honestly the least he could do after she'd witnessed him acting like a complete disaster of a human being. The following day in the school library, while Keiki was pretending to study and actually just thinking about his complicated love life, Sayuki appeared out of nowhere and interrupted his fake concentration. She whispered in his ear that made Keiki so uncomfortable that he choked to death right there in the library. She kept pushing him to embrace his role as her master, promising to be the most obedient pet he could ever imagine having. Seeing his obvious reluctance to commit to this wild arrangement, she grabbed his hands and pressed him with enough force to make him question whether he was dreaming or if this was actually his new reality. Yuika arrived just in time to save him from this overwhelming situation like a superhero swooping in during the final battle. She then confronted, asking why she was acting so absolutely thirsty for attention. Sayuki informed her that she and Keiki had gotten pretty close recently and even had the audacity to claim they'd gone on an actual romantic date. This revelation hit Yuika like a truck loaded with disappointment, making her so furious that she stormed out of the library faster than someone running from their responsibilities. Later, when the drama had settled down to a manageable level, Yuika approached Keiki with the defeated energy of someone who just lost their favorite character in a brutal anime death scene, asking if it was actually true that he'd gone on a romantic date with Sayuki. Keiki, trying to clear up this misunderstanding before it spiraled completely out of control, explained that they had literally just shared lunch together like normal human beings, but Sayuki had wildly assumed it counted as a date because apparently her definition of romance was more flexible than a yoga instructor. Hearing this explanation that made everything make sense again, Yuika became sad, and she confided in Keiki that he'd always been incredibly kind to Sayuki, but had never shown her the same level of attention, which honestly hit him right in the feels. Seeing Yuika looking upset, Keiki asked if there was anything he could possibly do to make her happy again and restore some balance to this chaotic situation. Getting excited, Yuika eagerly suggested they should go on an actual date together, which would finally give her the attention she'd been craving. A few hours later, while this cultured idiot was wondering who who owned a mysteriously cute asset that had appeared in his life like another plot twist, Mizuha suddenly burst into his room. She revealed that she'd somehow heard through the grapevine that he was about to go on his first official date in the history of his pathetic existence, and she'd come to bless him with some valuable tips on how to treat a girl properly without completely embarrassing himself and ruining everything. On the day of his epic date with Yuika that would either make or break his entire romantic future, Keiki followed every single piece of Mizuha's legendary advice. He complimented Yuika's outfit, held her hand, and took her to see the latest Squid Game season because apparently that's what cultured people do on dates. After absorbing all that fantasy drama, he suggested they go window shopping like a proper gentleman who knew how to treat a lady right. As they were leaving the mall feeling like a successful couple who'd conquered their first real date, Yuika excused herself to go handle some bathroom business that normal humans need to take care of. But when she took more time, Keiki's overthinking brain assumed something had gone horribly wrong and went into full panic mode, so he started searching for her like she was a missing person. He suddenly discovered Yuika being harassed by a group of absolute losers who apparently wanted to use her flat body like a tennis board. Without hesitation and channeling his interaction hero, he stepped in to save her from these losers who clearly had nothing better to do with their sad existence. Grateful for his heroic intervention that probably saved her from a traumatic experience, Yuika kissed Keiki on the forehead and called him her prince in shining armor, which made him feel like he just leveled up in the game of life. But Keiki told her he wasn't some fairy tale Prince Charming, but just a pathetic loser wrapped in cheap paper foil trying his best not to embarrass himself. She laughed at his self-deprecating humor, held his hand like they were actually a real couple, and together they boarded the train home feeling like they'd conquered the world. The next day, during his usual lunch session with Shuma where they discussed the mysteries of life and love, Keiki received a text from Yuika asking him to meet her in the school storage area because she had something earth-shattering to tell him that couldn't wait another second. Shuma, channeling his inner relationship expert, suggested that Yuika might actually be the mysterious goddess who sent that life-changing love letter and that she was about to confess her deepest feelings like some kind of romantic anime climax. Without wasting a single precious second, this simp made his way to the storage room. Inside this dusty sanctuary, he found Yuika already waiting there, but acting oddly suspicious, hiding behind the shelves. After teasing him for a minute, she finally dropped the most devastating bomb. She didn't want him as a lover who would shower her with affection, but as her personal slave who would obey her every twisted command. Before Keiki's brain could even begin to process what's happening to his previously normal life, Yuika moved with the speed of a plot twist that nobody saw coming, shoving him to the ground and pouncing on him with the energy of a predator. She pushed her assets into his face with enough force to nearly suffocate him into the next dimension, laughing maniacally like she is Kira from Death Note. The next morning, Keiki woke up with absolutely no memory of how he'd managed to make it home in one piece. All he could recall through the fog of his traumatized brain was Yuika telling him with fake concern that he had fainted from having too much fun and had been graciously transported to the school infirmary. Later that day at school, Keiki opened his locker expecting to find his boring textbooks, but instead discovered a pair of asset holders chilling there like they owned the place. Getting stunned, he quickly slammed the locker shut before anyone could witness this compromising evidence of his chaotic love life. After taking a moment, he opened it again with the caution of someone defusing a bomb, only to find a note from Yuika tucked inside along with the blue-beige trap that would probably haunt his dreams forever. Getting super annoyed, Keiki confronted Yuika with the fury of someone who'd had enough of this absolute madness, demanding an explanation for why she'd left holders in his personal space. Yuika casually replied that she is doing all the stuff just to get his attention, but Keiki, without a second thought, blurted out that he is not interested in any of her stuff. Clearly getting unimpressed, Yuika stood up and told him he was being a very bad boy who needed serious discipline. As his self-proclaimed master, she informed him that he deserved to be punished. She then moved closer with the predatory grace of someone who'd completely lost their mind, assuring him that she would make him her obedient slave even if it were the last thing she accomplished in her life. Upon hearing this absolutely terrifying threat, Keiki cowered in fear like someone who just realized they were about to become the victim in a horror movie. He bolted out of class and headed straight for his locker to grab his books, deciding it was infinitely better to head home and watch a peaceful movie than deal with these complete lunatics who were systematically ruining his previously boring but safe life. However, when he opened his locker expecting to grab his stuff and escape this madhouse, he found a compromising picture of him and Sayuki that looked like evidence from the scene of a crime. Along with this blackmail material, there was a note saying if he didn't come to the club room immediately, Sayuki would post the picture online for the entire world to see and judge. With absolutely no choice left in his rapidly shrinking options, Keiki rushed to the club room, knowing he was about to face whatever awaited him in this never-ending nightmare of romantic chaos. When he arrived, Keiki found Sayuki dressed in a maid outfit that looked like it came straight from your wildest dream. Getting more petrified than someone who just walked into the final boss battle completely unprepared, Keiki asked why she was dressed so good that it could probably cause heart attacks in weaker men. Sayuki innocently explained that she had read in some questionable book that if she wanted to be the best slave possible, like a loyal dog who would obey every command she absolutely had, to dress as a proper maid. Keiki immediately demanded she change out of her absolutely thirsty trap attire before someone called the authorities on this whole situation, but she pointed out with fake helplessness that her hands were locked behind her her back, and she can't be able to reach the key by herself. She begged Keiki to retrieve it. Reluctantly, Keiki reaches for the keys with so much caution, like he is defusing a nuclear bomb, and successfully fishes out the key, freeing her from the lock. Immediately afterward, like a tape recorder, Sayuki once again begged him to become her master, promising to do literally anything he wanted without any limits whatsoever. For a moment, Keiki thought deeply about this mega offer that would probably change his entire existence, with both the devil and angel on his shoulders whispering conflicting advice like some kind of moral cartoon showdown. The devil was probably telling him to embrace the chaos, while the angel was desperately trying to save what remained of his dignity. Ultimately, channeling his inner protagonist who wasn't ready to completely lose his mind, he decided against it and chose to hold on. Later that day, during his usual lunch therapy session with Shuma, where they tried to make sense of his increasingly insane love life, Shuma asked if he'd finally figured out whether Sayuki or Yuika was the mysterious goddess who sent that life-changing love letter that started this whole nightmare. Keiki admitted with the defeated energy that he still wasn't completely sure if either of these two girls was actually responsible for turning his boring life into this romantic disaster movie. Hearing this confession, Shuma suggested it could actually be Nanju, who he'd noticed stealing glances at Keiki like a girl secretly drowning in love but too shy to admit it, which would honestly be the biggest plot twist since discovering the quiet character was actually the most dangerous one. A few minutes later, Keiki was lying on a bench, staring up at the sky and wondering if there was any actual meaning to his pathetic existence. Just then, because the universe apparently had a sense of timing, he received a message from Sayuki asking him to meet her in the club room for what was probably going to be another life-altering encounter. On his way to face whatever fresh chaos awaited him, he accidentally bumped into Yuika in the hallway, and she immediately insisted they play a game. She then covered his eyes like they were playing blind man's bluff and tied him to a chair, informing him that she knew exactly where he was heading to see Sayuki like some kind of stalker. Since he'd apparently been a disobedient who didn't follow the rules of her twisted game, Yuika gave him two choices: kiss her foot like a devoted servant, or get his lips bitten by someone who'd completely embraced her sadistic side. Seeing Keiki hesitate to kiss her foot because he still had some dignity left in his rapidly deteriorating sense of self-respect, Yuika decided to take matters into her own hands and leaned in to kiss him instead. But at that exact moment, Sayuki burst into the hallway like an action hero making a dramatic entrance, accusing Yuika of stealing her precious master. The two girls immediately began insulting each other with more venom than enemies in a battle anime, while tugging on Keiki like he was a plot device caught between two opposing forces, each trying to claim him as their own personal prize in this insane competition. Just when things were getting more out of hand and Keiki was probably about to be torn in half by them, Nanju stormed in like a superhero, dragging Keiki away from the battlefield and saving him from these two baddies who'd completely lost their minds. Once they were safely outside and away from the war zone, Keiki felt relieved, thinking he had finally managed to escape the madness that had been consuming his entire existence. But his relief lasted about as long as a commercial break, because Nanju suddenly started screaming at him with more intensity than someone who'd been holding back their feelings for years, confessing that she couldn't contain her emotions anymore and absolutely didn't want him anywhere near any other woman. In the following weeks that felt like an eternity of awkwardness, Nanju began avoiding Keiki like he had some kind of contagious disease that would wound her heart beyond any possibility of repair. Despite his desperate efforts to have an actual conversation with her like two normal human beings, she coldly ignored him every single time with the efficiency of someone who'd mastered the art of giving the silent treatment. Meanwhile, in a surprising turn of events that nobody saw coming, Yuika apologized for her earlier display of absolute craziness but made it crystal clear that saying sorry didn't mean she was giving up on pursuing him. She also pointed out that Nanju seemed genuinely depressed and only showed any signs of happiness when she was around Keiki, which was honestly the most obvious thing anyone could notice. Yuika then suggested that he should probably patch things up with her before the situation got even worse. Not long after this surprisingly mature advice, Sayuki also apologized for her madwoman behavior in the hallway, promising to rein in her public flirtations so they wouldn't cause any more scenes that belonged in an adult anime. She echoed Yuika's surprisingly good advice and encouraged Keiki to make amends with Nanju, pointing out that they were all supposed to be friends despite this romantic battlefield they created. Taking the hint from these chaos agents, Keiki decided he needed to have a serious conversation with Nanju after class ended. Later that day, Keiki approached Nanju, hoping to reconcile before their friendship died a painful death. After some serious effort that involved more groveling than he'd ever done in his pathetic life, she finally agreed to give him another chance, but only on the condition that they hang out together with Shuma, their mutual childhood friend who apparently served as the perfect buffer zone for awkward situations. So after school ended and they were all free from the prison of education, the trio visited the arcade like they were reliving their glory days and played Zombie Attack. During one of the intense rounds where everyone was getting way too competitive, Keiki lost his balance like the clumsy disaster he'd always been, and Shuma, channeling his inner action hero in a somewhat awkward but surprisingly heroic move, grabbed him by the waist to keep him from face planting into the machine and embarrassing himself in front of the entire arcade. Nanju quickly snapped photos of his compromising moment and saved the evidence on her phone with a mischievous grin that should have been a massive red flag for what was coming. The rest of the day went surprisingly smooth. They all actually had genuine fun without anyone threatening to make him their slave or master. Afterward, because he was trying to be a proper gentleman, Keiki walked Nanju home through the peaceful streets. However, because the universe apparently had a sense of dramatic timing, it began to rain like the world was ending, so they quickly sought shelter under a nearby building. Seeing that Nanju looked exhausted, Keiki decided to be useful and went to get her a drink from a nearby vending machine, probably hoping some caffeine would revive her back to normal human functionality. When he returned expecting to find her resting peacefully, he noticed Nanju staring at a picture of Shuma on her phone with the intensity of someone studying for the most important exam of their life. Getting disappointed, he jumped to the conclusion that she was only using him as a stepping stone to get closer to Shuma, the guy she really had feelings for. With the logic of someone whose brain had completely shut down, Keiki then accused Nanju of secretly harboring romantic feelings for his best friend. Nanju instantly became defensive, yelling that he was completely and utterly wrong about everything while probably wanting to throw something at his stupid face, then stormed off into the rain. The next day at school, when they should have been acting like mature human beings, Keiki and Nanju refused to speak to each other with the stubbornness of two kids having the world's most ridiculous fight. Their concerned friends tried desperately to reconcile them, like mediators in a peace treaty negotiation, but both were too proud and stubborn to make the first move toward fixing this completely unnecessary disaster. At home, where he thought he could escape the drama, Mizuha noticed how distant and troubled Keiki had become because of this fallout with Nanju that was clearly eating him alive from the inside. She offered him some sisterly wisdom that hit harder than a truck, saying that girls are incredibly hard to understand, which made this poor guy think he was absolutely done for and would never figure out the opposite gender. The next day, channeling every ounce of determination he had left, Keiki approached Nanju again and demanded they have an actual conversation. She tried to walk away like she was escaping from a crime scene, but this time Keiki chased after her, insisting she listen to what he had to say before it got complicated. Finally, probably exhausted from running and realizing he wasn't going to give up, Nanju gave in to his desperate pleas for communication. Keiki sincerely apologized for jumping to completely wrong conclusions about her having a crush on Shuma, bowing his head like he was begging for forgiveness from the gods themselves and promising to do literally anything to earn her forgiveness and restore their friendship. Hearing this heartfelt apology that probably took every ounce of his courage, Nanju stepped closer and demanded that he get into a romantic relationship immediately. Keiki, getting caught off guard, naturally assumed she meant a relationship with her, which would honestly make perfect sense given everything that had happened between them. But to his absolute shock and disbelief, Nanju clarified with the most serious expression she could muster. She wanted him to be in a romantic relationship with Shuma, his childhood best friend who had absolutely no idea what was about to happen to his peaceful existence. Keiki's jaw practically hit the floor so hard it could have caused an earthquake, and his brain completely stopped functioning. Before he could even begin to process this absolutely mind-bending revelation, Nanju pulled out an entire album full of pictures from their arcade adventure, all depicting him and Shuma in the most compromising positions that would make anyone question what was really going on between them. She then enthusiastically admitted that she was a fujoshi, which is basically a fangirl completely obsessed with boy romance, and she'd been writing an entire BL novel starring him and Shuma as the main romantic couple. Apparently, her dedicated fans were eagerly awaiting the next chapter of this unexpected love story that she'd been crafting, which meant his entire romantic life had become someone else's entertainment without his knowledge or consent. Shortly afterward, Keiki received another mysterious threat that was probably going to turn his world upside down. Again, this time related to a compromising photo he found chilling in his locker like it owned the place. The message directed him to the school storage room for what was obviously going to be another life-altering meeting with someone who had way too much power over his existence. When he arrived at this increasingly familiar location of romantic disasters, Keiki met a girl named Udari, who finally revealed herself as the mastermind behind the recent threats that had been making his life a living nightmare. However, to his crushing disappointment that probably felt like getting punched in the gut, Utori wasn't the mysterious goddess who sent the love letter that started this whole adventure. She was completely obsessed with Shuma instead, which meant he still had no clue who his secret admirer actually was. Utori then confessed that she'd been secretly watching Shuma from afar, like some kind of romantic stalker, and could no longer contain the emotions that were driving her out of control. She wanted Keiki to help her get closer to his best friend, using their friendship as leverage in what was basically emotional blackmail. She even threatened to spread the embarrassing photo she had collected like some kind of blackmail expert if he didn't agree to act as her personal matchmaker in his twisted romance scheme. Left with absolutely no choice, Keiki reluctantly agreed to play wingman in what was probably going to be another disaster waiting to happen. The next day, channeling his inner Cupid who had no idea what he was doing, Keiki introduced Utori to Shoma. During their surprisingly normal conversation that didn't involve any threats or blackmail, Shuma and Udari discovered that they both shared a genuine love for tennis, which helped break the ice and made Shuma feel comfortable around her. The two exchanged contact information, and before leaving this surprisingly successful meeting, Keiki suggested they take a picture together to solidify their newfound friendship and probably create evidence that he'd actually accomplished something positive for once. As soon as Shuma left the scene completely unaware of the complex web of relationships surrounding him, Utori thanked Keiki for setting them up in what might actually become a real relationship, and she promised to cherish the picture forever. Later that night, this absolute legend Keiki found himself staring at the mysterious love love letter like some kind of detective wannabe, completely losing his mind over who could have sent this thing. The dude was basically having a mental breakdown trying to figure out his secret admirer's identity, which honestly makes him look like he's never gotten attention from girls before. The next day at school, he decided to spill the tea to Otori, who apparently thinks she's some kind of love guru or something. This girl straight up roasted the art club baddies, calling them creepy cult members who wouldn't know romance, and told Keiki to expand his search because literally any girl in school could be thirsting over him. However, Keiki probably thought this was the most helpful advice anyone had ever given him, which shows how clueless this man really is. Later that day, Keiki made his way to the art club room, but the moment he saw these psycho girls doing their usual unhinged behavior, he noped out of there faster than someone avoiding their ex at a party. As he climbed the stairs, probably thinking he was the main character in some romance anime, he crashed into this random girl carrying more papers than a tax accountant. She nearly ate concrete going down those stairs, but Keiki turned into Superman and cushioned her fall like some kind of heroic idiot. But here's where things get absolutely bizarre. This delusional girl who calls herself Fujimoto decided she wanted to stay on top of him like he was her personal chair or something. Keiki was sitting there in complete shock while Fujimoto made herself comfortable on his lap. Several hours later, still obsessing over this love letter like it held the secrets of the universe, Keiki decided to play detective and visited the faculty office. He asked Okita, the hall supervisor, if she'd seen anyone suspicious lurking around the club room, and she casually dropped that she'd spotted Fujimoto, the same weird girl from earlier, and the student council vice chairman hanging around that area. Keiki filed this information away like he was building some kind of conspiracy theory, but things were about to get even more insane. He randomly bumped into Fujimoto again, who thanked him for saving her from becoming a human pancake on the staircase and handed him some homemade snacks like they were best friends now. But then this girl completely lost her mind and hugged him while telling him she loved his repulsive smell, which left Keiki wondering if he'd accidentally become the school's unofficial girls magnet or if these girls just had seriously questionable taste. Trying to escape this madness, Keiki headed to the club room where he found Yuika sitting alone. The moment he walked in, he triggered a trap this girl had set up, and before he could even process what was happening, Yuika pounced on him like a wild animal. She confessed that she'd had some seriously inappropriate dreams about him and wanted to make them reality, which honestly sounds like something that should require a restraining order. Despite Keiki's protest, Yuika started giving him the kind of massage that would make a spa therapist quit their job, leaving him completely wrecked and wondering what the hell his life had become. Days later, Fujimoto invited Keiki on a field trip, but somehow Sakuya, who apparently thinks she's his loyal pet or something, insisted on tagging along like the world's most annoying third wheel. While they were out picking herbs, Sakuya cornered Keiki and started licking him like an actual dog, which honestly should have been his cue to run for the hills. At first, he was horrified and tried to push her away, but then his brain decided to remember some questionable advice his grandfather had given him about calming down their family dog Hako by grabbing its back and petting it. Recalling this absolutely unhinged advice, Keiki hesitantly placed his hand on Sakuya's rice cake and started playing with it, which somehow actually worked because Sakuya began making happy noises like she was getting the best massage of her life. So this madman decided to stroke even more aggressively, and afterward she thanked him for violating her dumplings in ways no one had ever done before, then just casually walked away like nothing happened, leaving Keiki confused. The following day at school, Fujimoto summons Keiki to the student council office like he's been called to the principal's office. He walks into the room expecting some boring paperwork, but instead finds it transformed into what looks like a fancy restaurant that wandered into the wrong building, complete with mood lighting and enough food to feed a small army. They sit down to eat together, and shortly after this unexpected feast, Fujimoto using Kiki's shoulder as her personal pillow. This walking disaster recognizes the situation as a classic romantic setup, so he decides to lie down next to her like some kind of discount Romeo. However, what should have been a peaceful power nap quickly turns into his worst nightmare when Kiki wakes up to discover Fujimoto licking him. In absolute panic mode, Kiki lets out a scream that could probably be heard 3 buildings away and demands to know what she thinks she's doing. Fujimoto, with the straightest face known to mankind, casually drops the bomb that she's got a serious fetish for boys' body odors, and out of all the stinky dudes she's encountered, Kiki's disgusting scent takes the crown. She also reveals she orchestrated this whole romantic setup just to get him to fall asleep so she could get a premium stuff, and to top off this absolute madness, she's literally begging him to hand over his plot armor. Following this traumatic encounter, Keiki meets up with his homies, Shuma and Utori, at some fast food joint where his brain starts cooking up the ultimate wingman strategy. He figures a double date would be the perfect way to cement Shuma and Utori's relationship. Once he gets home, this guy's having an internal debate about who to drag along on this double date mission. After weighing his options, he decides Sayuki is his safest bet since she seems like the only relatively normal person in his social circle. While they're waiting for Shuma to show up, Utori's pacing around like a nervous wreck because she's about to go go on a date with her crush, and Sayuki looking confused seeing Utori there too. When Keiki asks if they know each other, Sayuki drops that they were classmates back in first year. Shuma finally arrives, and the moment Utori starts talking to him and calls him senpai, Sayuki's face goes into complete shock mode, and she's about to spill the tea about Utori's real class. Keieki jumps in faster than a superhero to shut down her loose mouth before she ruins everything. After some quick explanations and probably some bribery, Sayuki realizes that Utori's been catfishing her age to get Shuma's attention because apparently he's not into older women. They head to the bowling alley where they agree to punish whoever comes in third and last place. While they're playing, Keiki's business brain starts working overtime, and he's thinking about starting a wingman service after seeing how well Shuma and Utori are vibing together. Meanwhile, he notices Utori recording every single moment like she's making a documentary about her love life so she can waste her time over it later. After the day wraps up, Keiki overhears Shuma asking Utori why she always rocks her hoodie indoors, and she admits she's ashamed of how small her size is, which shocks Shuma but leaves Keiki feeling like he just heard way too much personal information. When the scores come in, Sayuki ends up in dead last, so Utori, who absolutely dominated the game, uses her punishment privileges to make Sayuki uglier as a joke because apparently that's her idea of friendly banter. Shuma comes in third, and Utori seizes this golden opportunity to ask if she can call him by his first name, which makes him blush. Later, Keiki and Utori return to their secret strategy room, where Utori's practically bouncing off the walls talking about how amazing her date was with the person she's head over heels for, and she even managed to score a second date with him. She's thanking Keiki like he's some kind of romance wizard who made all her dreams come true. But Keiki, being the honest dude he is, tells her he only did it so she'd delete that picture, and Utori drops the biggest plot twist of all. She actually deleted the photo on the very first day he promised to help her because she trusted him that much. She then hits him with another bombshell, saying she doesn't need his wingman services anymore and has decided to confess her love to Shuma, leaving Keiki surprised. The next day, while she was walking home with Shuma, Utori suddenly drops a bombshell that would make any anime fan question reality. She reveals she's actually a third-year student, completely destroying everything this poor dude thought he knew about her. She apologizes and confesses that she had been lying this whole time just to get close to him, all because she fell head over heels for him ever since he gave her that hat. However, Shuma tells her he can't date her because of the age gap, which crushed this girl's soul. Following this tragic display of stupidity, Keiki meets him at the park to roast him for being the biggest idiot on the planet for turning down a girl who genuinely loved him just because he's into younger girls. Shuma replies that he also feels like a complete fool, since he had actually started to like the girl he met that day because she was cute, but he never saw her again after that. He adds that he never realized Utori was the same girl from that day because her hair was shorter, and when he made her cry, it broke his heart too, making him feel like the villain in his own love story. Later, Keiki returns to Utori and finds her crying like someone just told her favorite anime was getting canceled forever, feeling terrible that even after Keiki's help, she still got dumped. However, Keiki decides to cheer her up by roasting Shuma for being dumb enough to pass on a cute girl like her, and Utori soon joins in insulting him too. Just as they're both tearing this guy apart, they suddenly notice Shuma standing at the door, looking like he had just lost his life savings to crypto. Utori immediately pulls out Doctor Strange level hand movements, trying to explain that they were actually talking about him, which obviously makes zero sense. Shuma moves closer to apologize for being such a creep, then asks if they could at least start as friends. Utori immediately calls him out, making him feel like a psycho with a low IQ. However, she soon reveals that she was only teasing him and agrees to be friends with some kind of benefits, because apparently that's how modern romance works. Just as Bro lights up with excitement, he runs to turn on the light since the room was dark, only to discover that this girl had been stalking him all his life. The next day, Keiki wakes up in his bed, and his first task is to sniff that asset and wonder who they belong to, because he would love to do more than just sniff, proving that anime protagonists really have their priorities straight. Later, Keiki accidentally walks in on his sister while she's in the bath. Upon seeing that beautiful work of art, he quickly turns away before completely losing his mind, because that's exactly what any normal person would do. Following that, he apologizes for seeing her in full HD, and she tells him it's okay, because apparently sibling relationships in anime operate on a completely different wavelength than reality. However, she asks if something's on his mind since it had been a while since he peeped at her like that, which raises so many questions about their household dynamics. Keiki starts off by asking what she would do if he wanted to make a girl his pet, and Mizuha replies that she would call the police, which is probably the most reasonable response anyone has given. He then asks, what if he became a girl's slave, and she gives the same answer. This cultured idiot then asks, what if he said he wanted to sniff a girl's assets, and again, she replies that she'd call the police before adding that it was weird. Just then, Keiki finally asks, what if he just wanted to fall in love, and she teases him, saying she would also call the police, because being in a relationship while looking as ugly as he did should be a criminal offense. However, she then says she would support him if he ever genuinely wanted to fall in love. While they were talking about the most normal sibling conversation topics, they heard the doorbell ring like some kind of plot device, summoning the next chapter of chaos. When Keiki went to open the door, he was shocked to see Sayuki standing there, who told him she had come over because she was bored and wanted to spice things up with him. He takes her to his room, where she puts on a dog costume and asks him to treat her like his pet. Keiki immediately refuses, showing he has at least least 2 brain cells left, but she threatens to expose him if he doesn't do what she demands, proving that blackmail is the universal language of teenage romance. Reluctantly, he complies like the spineless protagonist he's destined to be. While he's petting her stomach, she pushes his head into her chest, and this idiot stays like that until his sister walks in on them. Keiki quickly explains to Mizuha that it wasn't what it looked like, which is probably the most overused line in the history of embarrassing moments. Following that disaster, Sayuki leaves, probably satisfied with the chaos she's unleashed. Soon after, Yuika appears like some kind of costume-obsessed fairy godmother and gives him a bunny costume, demanding that he act as her slave or else she would expose him too, because apparently everyone in this story has dirt on this poor guy. He immediately puts on the costume and starts acting like a complete fool, which honestly isn't that different from his normal behavior. Yuika makes fun of him and then decides to reward him by flashing her assets, leaving Keiki in the pool of embarrassment. This prompts him to ask why she's so comfortable showing a boy her assets, which is actually a reasonable question in this bizarre situation. She replies that he was the only one who had exclusive access to her premium content because he was special to her. Just then, she jumps on him for the sake of quick plot development, but once again, Mizuha walks in like she has some kind of sixth sense for the worst possible timing. Keiki quickly follows her to explain his compromising position again. After Yuika leaves, Keiki returns from the bathroom and checks the spot where he had hidden that asset, intending to sniff them again like an addict searching for his next fix, but to his shock, they are gone. He later meets Udari, and the two of them speculate on who could have taken the assets between the two girls who had visited. This could reveal who the mysterious girl who dropped the love letter was. Udari states that taking the assets back could have been a sign, prompting Keiki to ask what she meant. He still needs everything explained to him. She further explains that if the mysterious girl had taken her assets back, it must mean she never intended to leave them with the love letter in the first place. Now determined to find out who had the assets, Keiki visits Sayuki and asks her to become his pet for a day because apparently his investigation methods are as questionable as his social skills. The next day, they went on a date to the park, with Keiki determined to find out whether Sayuki was really that mysterious girl. He tells her to stay close to him the entire time, like a real pet. As they walk around, he wonders how to investigate the missing assets without sounding like a complete psychopath. Eventually, he asks if they should start with the roller coaster, and Sayuki becomes instantly embarrassed, concerned about her skirt flying up. Seeing this, Keiki wonders if she's flustered because she's wearing the white asset, turning a simple amusement park ride into an undercover operation. To find out, he insists they ride the roller coaster anyway, even though she clearly doesn't want to shock her. The most disappointing moment of Keiki's pathetic life hits when he realizes his grand asset spotting mission is an absolute failure, not a single flash during the roller coaster or any other ride, leaving this poor guy completely empty-handed. While he's drowning in his own misery, Sayuki cheerfully asks what they should do next, and he tells her to pick whatever her heart desires, though his brain is clearly somewhere else entirely. She immediately drags him to the Ferris wheel, and this cultured moron suddenly realizes he's struck gold. They're floating high above the world, away from judgmental eyes, which means this could be his perfect chance to finally get some action. However, before his smooth-talking abilities can even kick in, she completely scrambles his circuits by shifting her clothes and licking his lips, turning his brain into absolute mush and leaving him super confused. After they climb down from the ride, he feels like the biggest failure on planet Earth for not capitalizing on his golden opportunity, and while he's busy, Sayuki casually asks why he suddenly decided to become her master. He launches into some rambling explanation that honestly sounds like complete waste, but nobody cares about it. As they're walking back, Keiki decides to flip the script and asks Sayuki why she chose him as her master in the first place, which makes her explain that joining his club was her trigger moment. She just happened to develop feelings for this absolute disaster. She admits that when she tried getting close to him, he rejected her without hesitation, but she doesn't regret making him her master. When it's time to part ways, this determined fool refuses to let his mission crash and burn so easily, so he stops Sayuki right before she leaves and boldly asks her to show him her asset. She gets embarrassed, but he pulls the MasterCard and tells her it's his final order for the day, which apparently works like magic. However, this dude gets the shock of his lifetime when he discovers that this girl has been going commando the entire time, which explains absolutely nothing about his missing assets. The next day rolls around and Sayuki starts acting like a jealous girlfriend whenever she sees Keiki and Yuika together, which makes Yuika suspicious enough to ask what happened between them. Both of these idiots stay silent, so Yuika decides to start doing naughty stuff to Keiki just to get a reaction out of Sayuki, who's clearly about to explode but somehow manages to keep her cool. Keiki notices the tension building and gets worried, so he rushes to meet with his investigation committee to give them a full report on this soap opera situation. Later, he decides to have a direct conversation with Sayuki to figure out what's eating her alive, and she immediately complains that he is glued to Yuika while completely ignoring her existence. Keiki tries explaining that it wasn't intentional, but Sayuki goes off about how she expected him to take her to Cloud 9 that day, especially after she gave him a lip lock, but this useless, riskless dummy just fumbled the biggest opportunity of his pathetic life. While he's standing there trying to defend himself, he suddenly considers asking her directly about the assets since she's his prime suspect, but he figures she probably won't confess so easily. However, Sayuki immediately admits that she stole something from his room, which makes Keiki think he's finally caught the mysterious girl red-handed. But then this dumb skull lifts her skirt and reveals that she actually stole his boxers, which makes him realize she's not that mysterious girl at all. With Yuika Yuika as his only remaining suspect. Keiki follows her home that day, and while she goes inside to get him some water, he quickly starts rummaging through her asset collection. Unfortunately, she catches him in full HD and shows him a picture she snapped during his criminal act, which makes him realize he's completely screwed and probably going to jail. She then blackmails him into becoming her personal slave. The next day, Keiki continues acting like her obedient little servant, attending to all her ridiculous demands like some pathetic butler, which absolutely disgusts Sayuki, who finally snaps and asks what is going on. When she realizes Yuika is blackmailing him, she completely loses it and tells Yuika to get herself away from her master because he's definitely not going to fall for her. The two girls soon launched into an epic showdown and demanded that Keiki pick his favorite between them, which made this poor dude try to dodge the question like he was in a minefield. After getting pestered relentlessly, he finally admits his preference for larger stuff, causing Yuika to feel like she just got eliminated from a reality show in the most brutal way possible. However, she immediately whips out her secret weapon to prove she has a deeper connection with Keiki, which makes Sayuki burn with jealousy and storm off. Meanwhile, Keiki continues his unfortunate career as Yuika's personal assistant and realizes he desperately needs to figure out if she's the mysterious girl before this whole situation spirals into complete chaos. A few days later, after returning from yet another ridiculous task, Yuika heads to the bathroom, and he thinks this might be his golden opportunity to investigate her drawer again. Unfortunately, Yuika suddenly appears out of nowhere and warns him that if he dares to snoop around, he'll be stuck as her servant until the end of time. Moments later, Yuika lets out a shriek from the bathroom, and when our discount superhero rushes to her rescue, she gets embarrassed and leaves a permanent dent on his forehead. She then punishes him, and this guy can't do anything except apologize for being a worthless fool. After that chaos settles down, she asks him to sit beside her and starts sharing incredibly boring stories about her mysterious past and how she developed feelings for him, which makes her blush like a tomato. She tries to make a sneaky exit, but Keiki pulls her back and they end up in an awkward position on the bed. She genuinely thinks he's about to make some serious moves, but this genius suddenly pulls out his personal belongings from a random corner and asks her why his stinking boxers are chilling in her room. She turns red with embarrassment and explains that she snatched them when she visited the other day, which makes him realize she's committed the exact same crime that turned him into her slave in the first place. He immediately cancels their ridiculous contract and declares his freedom like he just escaped from prison. The next day, he encounters Nanju, who asks if he has a girlfriend because she needs to interview him for some manga project she's working on, and he reveals that he's single like a forgotten penny on the sidewalk. Hearing this tragic news, Nanju immediately climbs all over him and asks him to be her boyfriend, which makes this hopeless romantic think she's about to plant one on him. However, she crushes his dreams by explaining that she doesn't usually kiss creatures that look like him and only wanted to study how guys react to being approached by girls. Now that she's gathered her research data, she leaves him feeling like a complete failure. Later, he bumps into Fujimoto, who immediately wraps him in a bear hug just to smell his sweat. She then hands him a pool ticket that admits 5 people but mentions she won't be attending, which leaves him scratching his head about her mysterious motives. Keiki heads to a strategy session with Utori and shockingly discovers Shuma and the girl with modest assets in what looks like a very compromising position that would make any parent panic. Thankfully, Utori quickly explains that Shuma was just trying to catch her when she took a tumble, which saves everyone from an awkward explanation. They immediately start collecting scattered photos from the floor, and while helping out, Keiki invites them to join the pool party. However, he spots a familiar date on one of the photographs and suddenly realizes that mysterious girl might actually be her, which makes his detective brain start working overtime. He comes up with the brilliant idea to invite all the members of the art club along with his sister to the pool right after school, figuring he might as well use up that extra ticket he's been carrying around. After handing out swimsuits, the girls humor him by modeling their outfits, showcasing their various fashion sense from the most impressive to the most humble. Sayuki and Yuika immediately launch into another argument about who gets to stick closest to him, but he tells them not to stress about it since he's got enough attention to go around for everyone. While the group was having the time of their lives, Keiki decided to hunt down Mizuha, who had mysteriously vanished like a ninja to the indoor pool. When he finally tracked her down, this girl had managed to give herself a leg cramp because apparently swimming requires actual skill, so he had to carry her out of the pool. This whole rescue mission triggered some serious nostalgia for Mizuha, who started remembering how this dude used to carry her around when they were little kids. She couldn't help but smile at the memory and decided to mess with him a bit, casually dropping the bomb that she discovered his secret stash of cultured manga, which made him turn redder than a tomato. After that awkward revelation, they bumped into Koharu, who was apparently running some kind of love confession contest. One by one, Sayuki, Yuika, Nanju, and Mizuha each took their shot at confessing their feelings to Keiki like it was some twisted reality show. However, it was Mizuha's heartfelt confession that completely stole the show, as she admitted she'd been head over heels for him this entire time. This confession hit Keiki, and he started wondering what kind of love she was talking about. After the contest wrapped up, he waited for her, and when she asked why he hadn't bounced with the others, he told her they needed to have a serious conversation. He started by apologizing, then lifted her skirt slightly to reveal the mysterious girl's asset she was wearing, exposing the secret he'd been suspecting for ages. He confessed that he'd figured out she was a mysterious girl all along. He then explained that organizing this whole pool outing and handing out swimsuits wasn't just for fun, it was all part of his master plan. He believed believed that if she was truly the mysterious girl, she would bring those assets with her because she wouldn't want to leave them behind for him to find, giving her the perfect opportunity to wear them after swimming. Mizuha, cornered but still super curious, asked how he'd managed to piece it all together. Keiki explained that the timestamp on the photo he'd found matched her being at school during some weird hour, something only the real mysterious girl could have pulled off. With no choice but to come clean, Mizuha admitted she'd been in love with him for ages. However, Keiki quickly pointed out that they were siblings, making the situation way more complicated than anyone signed up for. Mizuha, completely unfazed by this minor detail, reminded him that since they were only 5 months apart in age, it was literally impossible for them to be biological siblings. She then apologized before planting her lips on his, catching him completely off guard. Later on, Keiki found himself in the most bizarre situation where Sayuki was waking him up and casually informing him that they were now married. In this surreal nightmare, he was leading her on a walk like she was some kind of pet. However, just as quickly as this weird dream began, he jolted awake and thanked every god he could think of, realizing it was only a strange nightmare. His sudden scream startled Mizuha, who had been sleeping next to him on the bed like this was totally normal. She got all excited and started kissing his face, but despite his shock, he quickly told her to cut it out. She brushed it off, explaining that she'd been worried since he'd been avoiding her and she just couldn't help herself. Keiki, feeling like he was trapped in some kind of romantic comedy gone wrong, decided to flee from home like a coward. He made a desperate call to his father, who then confirmed that Mizuha wasn't actually his biological sister, leaving Keiki even more confused than before. This revelation only added to his mental chaos. Seeking some kind of guidance, he reached out to a friend who suggested that dating Mizuha might not be as weird as he thought, given that they weren't actually related by blood. Even so, Keiki couldn't shake those uncomfortable feelings that were eating at him. Afterward, he thought about crashing at Shuma's place, but with the family gathering already taking up all the space, there was no room for him to stay. Shama also refused to let Keiki stay at Otori's house because he was insecure that his bro might steal his girl. Wandering around like a lost puppy, he bumped into Nanju, who offered him food, comfort, and some other kind of comfort that we won't get into. She revealed that Mizuha had always turned down other boys because she had feelings for him, and urged Keiki to stop being an idiot and go back home. Meanwhile, back at home, Mizuha was going through it like a character in a soap opera. She had this absolutely haunting dream about the accident that took her parents' lives, which only made her more anxious about Keiki's safety because apparently this girl can't catch a break. She cared about him more than anything, and the thought of something bad happening to him was messing with her head big time. On the flip side, Keiki was equally messed up in the brain, not wanting to lose the bond he had with Mizuha, the person he'd always seen as his sister and now suddenly wasn't. As the rain started pouring like the universe was crying, Mizuha went out searching for him like some kind of romantic movie heroine, but eventually returned home to prepare a meal because even in crisis mode, someone's gotta eat. Keiki, exhausted from wandering around like a lost soul, finally dragged himself back home, soaked and looking like a drowned rat. Mizuha was relieved to see him and immediately started fussing over him, making sure he wasn't about to die from pneumonia. Keiki woke up to the most unexpected surprise. Sayuki was chilling in his room like she owned the place. Mizuha had let her in, thinking it would help him recover faster. Without any hesitation, Sayuki slipped under the blankets and attempted to warm him up, but things took a wild turn when Mizuha walked in and caught them in this awkward situation that looked way worse than it actually was. Instead of losing her mind, Mizuha quietly left like a saint, probably dying inside. Not long after, Sayuki fell asleep, only for Yuika to enter the room like some kind of avenging angel. Yuika furiously pulled Sayuki off the bed, and the two started arguing like they were fighting over the last slice of pizza. After some back and forth drama, they agreed to a truce, deciding they could both love Keiki, which only made this whole situation 10 times more complicated. Mizuha returned once again, catching them in the middle of their weird argument and immediately shooed them away like they were stray cats, insisting that Keiki needed to rest and recover first. Left alone with his thoughts, Keiki began reflecting on the first time he had met Mizuha, getting all nostalgic and emotional. Lost in his memories, he headed to the bathroom only to accidentally walk in on Mizuha in her natural state. Embarrassed beyond belief, he quickly apologized, and they soon began talking about their feelings like adults for once. Mizuha opened up, telling him that her feelings had started the very first time they met, and the two shared a heartfelt moment, reconciling as they laughed together, with Mizuha getting a little too comfortable with the physical contact. When summer ended and school resumed, Keiki was still as lonely as ever, but this time he was surrounded by the strangest group of friends imaginable and a sister who wanted him at any cost. Later on, this dude found out that Mizuha was running a premium cultured content just like a secret business empire, and she revealed that on the day of the mysterious letter, she hadn't been wearing any assets and had only thrown on the mysterious girl's assets at the last minute because she'd gotten sweaty. Unfortunately, Keiki returned before she had a chance to fully dress, which explained everything and nothing at the same time. Once again, Keiki was left completely speechless, unable to believe the absolutely chaotic situations he kept finding himself in. She then asked him to accept her the way she was and become her boyfriend, but he gave her a resounding no, just like how reality rejected your chances of ever getting a girlfriend. If you watched till the end, comment your favorite baddie down below, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new video.